Talking Radio podcast on radio telephony. My name is Dylan Kimlo. I'm going to be hosting this podcast series specifically for pilots, air traffic controllers, and ground-based operations personnel. As we go through the various episodes, I will guide each one of those disciplines and give a whole lot of information to assist you in preparing to speak on the radio and when speaking on the radio. So what we're going to do is today we're just going to do a general overview of how to go about preparing to speak on the radio. This is critical for all the disciplines that we've mentioned, and what we need to do is we need to do a bit of pre-planning. So how are we going to go about speaking on the radio? Now before we do that, we need to first make sure that the radio is serviceable. So what you need to be focused on in this instance is not just the switching on and off of the radio, but the serviceability of the radio itself. Often you'll find that we don't set the radio to the correct volume, for example, and we don't really know whether the volume is set correctly unless we do a radio check. So some of you might have a radio, you're looking at it might be a handheld radio, depends what you find, a radio that's fitted to the aircraft that you fly, and they've got various settings on them. One in particular is the word squelch. Now some of you might not know what this term means, you might have seen it before but just not familiar with the term itself, or you've never really played around with a toggle switch. So when you switch your radio on, you'll turn your volume up and you'll get to a point on the radio where there's let's call it background noise. In the aviation industry, we call it clutter. So there's noise. When you push the PTT, that's the push to talk button, normally located on the left-hand side of your handheld radio and on a selection switch on the in the fitted radio to your aircraft. And for ground crew as well. They experience the same, the same fittings on their radios. Now, if you turn the volume down again, say we've turned it up to a point where we hear a lot of background noise, and you start turning it down again, you'll notice that that background noise disappears, and you might think that that's actually gotten rid of the clutter of that background noise, where in fact all that you've done is you've turned the volume down and you've then adjusted your audible tone. So people that are on the receiving side trying to hear your transmission are not going to hear you as clearly as if you were set your volume in conjunction with the squelch. So what you're going to need to do is turn the volume up again on that radio to a point where you hear this background noise, something like this. Well, that was just me making that noise, by the way. But yes, you're going to hear something like that. Now, as you adjust the squelch, you'll move the squelch button very slowly. You move it to a point where that background noise disappears. When you get to that point, that's where you leave the settings on your radio. Now, the squelch can be caused by numerous factors. There could be interference just due to the location of the aircraft and a hangar door, for example. It could be a storm that's approaching the airfield, and you're going to hear intermittent carrier wave with the signal in the background, an intermittent signal which gets stronger and stronger, obviously as the storm draws nearer to your location, or the cloud cover as such draws closer to your location. So that would be the setting complete between the volume and the squelch button. For those of you that don't have a squelch button on your radio, that's an unfortunate situation, because you now are faced with background noise which you're not really going to get rid of. What you need to remember here, though, with this simple exercise, is that adjusting the volume does not remove the clutter. It affects the audibility of the transmission. Alright, so you've switched the radio on, you've adjusted your squelch. Now you need to test the radio. The radio can be tested with another party. In aviation we refer to another party. This party, if you're the pilot, could be air traffic control, for example, if you're in controlled airspace. If you're in uncontrolled airspace, it could merely be somebody else that's at that airfield as well, somebody on the ground, somebody in flight. If you're ground-based operations, you'll be doing this test with your operational crew that are part of the bigger scheme in terms of what type of business you're managing. In either instance, it's ideal if you do this radio test with somebody else, somebody that can reply to you. There is a radio test procedure which you can do by yourself as well. I will show you both of those now as we go through the test. But before we get to the test, let's just come back to you, the operator. So you've switched the radio on, you've adjusted the volume, you've adjusted the squelch. Now you'll be getting ready to do a radio check with somebody, anybody that's out there that can assist you. Before you do that radio test, you need to make sure that you as the operator feel comfortable with the communication on the radio itself. It's kind of something like if you're standing in front of a bunch of people that you're going to be presenting a 2-minute lecture to. Think about when you were back at school and you have to prepare, even if it's a rehearsed speech. When you're standing in front of everybody, you suddenly feel nervous, you're feeling uneasy, you're feeling as if everybody is watching you, which they are, and they're just waiting for you to say something. Well, this is what this presentation here is all about, is to prepare you for that, and how do you adjust to this situation. Particularly because, as you know, if you're in the aviation industry, radio telephony is a whole different language, or so it may appear, especially to the person that's starting out doing this for the first time. So in order to make you feel at ease and make you feel comfortable, you need to feel that you have control of this radio and that the radio doesn't have control of you. That's the best way to look at it. So in order to do that, plan your message. That's point number 1, plan your message. So you think about what you're going to say, and then you're going to speak. When you're going to speak, make sure that you use the correct phonetic alphabet. Now, what is the phonetic alphabet? That's a host of letters from A to Z or Z, as you know them, of A, B, C. Instead, in this instance, we use the phonetic alphabet to replace that terminology, and we've got letters like Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, etc. Okay, all 26, which we'll do in another podcast, and we'll define it further. But for now, there's also not just the phonetic alphabet, but there's a set procedure that we need to follow in terms of communication. This is something that you would have practiced before you even got to your radio, ideally with the person that's presenting a radio course to you. Maybe somebody in your family close to you is already involved in aviation, involved in speaking on the radio, and they can work with you in this. But you do need to practice before you come to the radio. You don't want to sound like this. Okay, you can hear me giving up at the end there. That's basically unsure of what to say and realizing once you select the push to talk that you're going live. And once you're live, well, just like me talking to you now, there's no going back. Whatever mistakes I make in this presentation to you, that's the mistake I'm making, and I've got to correct it as soon as possible. Nothing here is rehearsed in what I'm presenting, but I'm not promoting that with where you're going, because where you're going, you need to follow a protocol. So set procedure, set process. This is not going to be just a quick chat with your friend. This is going to be speaking in terms of a procedure to get something done. Everybody is waiting for you when you select the PTT, the push to talk, because once you select it, you are the master of that airwave at that time. This is normally done on what we call a VHF frequency, which stands for very high frequency, VHF. And when you select the PTT, nobody that's selected on that frequency at the time can override you. In other words, if you are speaking on the frequency at the time, and I try to intercept that transmission, all that's going to happen is that there's going to be interference taking place on my side, and side, your transmission's going to get clipped. But most likely, everybody will still hear your transmission, although it will be broken. The transmission will be broken. In other words, there's interference taking place. All right, so before I take us way off of course here, let's just come back on track again. Here's you trying to speak on the radio and preparing to what you're going to say. So plan your message, think about what you're going to say. If you find that you're selecting the push to talk, the PTT, and you're going into some kind of apprehensive state, meaning you're not sure what was it I was going to say again, how should I go about it? If you find that you're inside that phase of mind at that stage, stop talking. So in other words, take your finger off the PTT, the push to talk. Think about what you want to say, plan, and speak again. When you speak it to the other party and they hear the apprehension in your voice, they hear the doubt, they hear the confusion, it's almost a guarantee that they're going to also become apprehensive. If you're the air traffic controller speaking to the pilot is going to definitely become a little bit unsure of the situation. Does this air traffic controller really know where I am? Am I on the right heading? Vice versa, it's the same process. If the controller hears the pilot saying, we are over the air traffic controller is just going to stop everything else that they're doing at the time and put their 100% focus on that aircraft, because this is immediately an unsafe situation that's taking place here. And we want to curb that. We do not want to feel that when we go on frequency, that everybody's looking to us as some form of a hazard. We want to speak confidently, clearly, and we want to know what we're saying on frequency. So when in doubt, stop speaking, gain your composure, breathe, that's very important, of course, and then proceed and say your message. Now, practice is definitely going to be needed here. And you, as you know, with anything else, if you're going to start learning a new language, you're going to need to practice, you're going to need to go through the spelling of the term and then the pronunciation of the term quite often before you start putting the pieces of the puzzle together. So basically you start forming a sentence. And the same goes with radio telephony. You want to put some kind of sentence together. We call this a transmission. If you want to put the transmission together, you need to know what you're going to say. All right? So confidence is what you need. Practice is going to get you there. Now that you're feeling a bit more comfortable with the actual preparation of speaking on the radio, always remember that the microphone that you're going to speak into needs to be close to your mouth, but not right up against your mouth. We don't want to have you feeling in a state of I feel like I'm swallowing this microphone. The microphone needs to be there, but it mustn't be in the way, if that makes sense. It mustn't also be too far away, so that your transmission starts to get softer and softer. Because the softer it gets, the harder it is for anyone to hear you, and the person that you, in this case, if you want to fly into controlled airspace and you're trying to speak to the air traffic controller, they're not going to allow you to get airborne for a start if you're still on the ground. If you're in flight, they're not going to allow you into the controlled airspace because the transmission is not clear and audible. That means that if they hear your transmission or if they give you a transmission, how do they know or you know that the other parties actually heard or received that transmission? Right? So you don't want this situation to take place. We need to make sure about everything around the radio before we plan to go and fly. This is something you need to get into a habit of doing. Whatever you find, or whether you're working on the ground, as I said earlier, ground-based operations, this could be the operator speaking to the commercial flight that's inbound. We need to make sure that we are fully prepared for the communication activity and that we are going to be that the radio itself is going to be on our side. In other words, that everything is working, everything is serviceable. We've got the microphone in the correct place when we're going to speak. We know what we're going to say, and we know how we're going to say it as well. So for this podcast, we want to include the radio check, because this is helping us in the preparation with the radio itself. So this does form part of the radio serviceability process. The radio check is done following a set table. This table, the radio strength table, goes from strength 1 to strength 5. In aviation, we pronounce that 5. The numerals will still be gone through in the next podcast, or one of the next few podcasts where we define numerals and the phonetic alphabet. So for this short recording, we're going to use the numbers as follows: 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. These all serve as a reference to the radio strength table. Now, where am I getting all this information from? This is not just from my years of experience in aviation. This is all defined in a manual called ICAO. ICAO stands for International Civil Aviation Organization, and this volume that we're working from is very easy to remember. It's volume 4444. That's right, you heard it, ICAO volume 4444. So when in doubt, we refer to the references there to give us guidance. In aviation, we need some kind of a guidance. We can't just come up with the terms that we think are right. We need to know what is everybody else using, and how are we going to manage that in our airspace and in our communication. Okay, so getting back to radio strength check. Strength 1 is unserviceable, meaning it's just a background noise, lots of clutter. Maybe you set your squelching correctly with the volume. That could be a strength 1. Strength 2, I'm reading you every now and then. That's the party that's listening to you. I hear every second or third transmission. Oh, sorry, not even second or third transmission. I'm hearing every second or third word. Still not the ideal situation. I'll give you an example. I am, then I will. Now, what did I just say there? I'm not really sure. I don't even know what sentence I was trying to put together there. I'm just giving you an example of what strength 2 is. It's not really a good idea if the other party is going to just put something together. The next strength is strength 3. Strength 3 is readable with difficulty. So I can hear you, but there's background noise. This background noise could be anything. But it's causing an interruption in the transmission itself. Strength 4 is readable. This is normally determined on the ground, from ground to ground operation, where we still have interference, such as hangars, other aircraft, trees, obstacles. Okay, that's the transmission's working within a close proximity, that is, but it's not clear. Your last transmission is strength 5, that is perfectly readable. So strength 4, readable. Strength 5, perfectly readable. And strength 5 is normally between ground to air or air to ground. Less obstructions, but again, if we're working with VHF, very high frequency, there's a limited range in which that transmission is going to be strength 5 without any other support structure, okay, any other beacons that can assist. So we call that a relay. A forward relay that will help with that transmission. Okay. All right, that doesn't really form part of this particular episode. We're just focusing on the radio strength test. And now let's just go through the transmission itself. So if I'm going to call somebody, I'm going to just call them talking radio as the person I'm talking to, the party. And then I'm just going to be my call sign, which is Zulu Tango Bravo Oscar Bravo. Talking radio. This is Zulu Tango Bravo Oscar Bravo. Now I'm calling the party. In this case, I'm talking to fictitious, of course. This could be the time in this example, and they come back to me and say, talking radio. Correction, they don't say that. They say, Bravo Oscar Bravo, this is talking radio. Pass your message. Now, we might still hear this term go ahead being used. It's been phased out through the RT circles, but it's still very strong out there. So even I struggle with that. But the correct term nowadays is pass your message. You reply, radio check. How do you read me? Not how do you read. If you say radio check, how do you read? Anyone could answer and say, well, I read with my reading glasses. I read from left to right. I read from right to left. I read with a glass of milk at night. Anything, okay? That's not really what we want. We want aviation. How do you read me? The reply using one of the numbers from the radio strength table determining the actual readability scale would be reading you strength 4. And your reply would be strength 4. Bravo, Oscar, Bravo. So let's go through that again from the top with no interruptions from myself. Talking radio, Zulu Tango, Bravo, Oscar, Bravo. Bravo, Oscar, Bravo, pass your message. Radio check. How do you read me? Reading you strength 5. Copied strength 5. Bravo, Oscar, Bravo. Alright, so that's just a simple radio check that I'm adding to this episode. Hope you've enjoyed this introduction to RT, radio telephony, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Thank you for listening. This is Dylan Kemlo. Bye-bye.